بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. So the talk tonight, as Brother Musalla mentioned, is on another theme from the 31st of Nahj al-Balagha. The theme that I selected tonight actually is one of the fundamental themes in this letter. And Imam Ali salam uses the theme to ground many of his advice later. The theme is on how to pick, how to find the proper path, the proper approach for our spiritual development. Just to start with a preliminary discussion, this is one of the main concerns that most of us we have. So many of us have been raised in devoted families, in religious communities, and one of the main concerns that we are dealing with is to find a path to develop our spirituality, to attain higher levels of irfan, higher levels of spiritual insight. When we read the stories of the Prophet, peace be upon him, of Ahlul Bayt, when we read the stories of some of our top scholars who excelled in spirituality, it happens frequently that we think, why not to search for a path to also find what works for us in the spiritual realm, how to improve our characteristics, how to improve our morality, how to improve our spiritual understanding. However, the path may not be that much clear. It's a choice, it's a decision that one cannot do it, cannot make it carelessly. There are so many people, there are so many ideologies, there are so many figures who claim to have the key to spiritual perfection. And we have countless examples of people who fall victim to the false claims of spiritual perfection. So how to approach, how to carefully look for what fits for us, what works for us. That's the topic mainly I'm going to discuss tonight, relying on the advices of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali alayhi salam in the letter 31st of Nahj al-Balagha. So Imam alayhi salam addresses the same question when he writes to his son about how to find the proper approach towards spirituality. First, Imam says, my son, you have to be aware that there are prerequisites, conditions that you have to fulfill before embarking on this journey. وَاعْلَمْ يَا بُنَيْ أَنَّ أَحَبَّ مَا أَنْتَ آخِذٌ بِهِ إِلَيَّ مِنْ وَصِيَّتِي. The best takeaway that you can have from my advice here, which Imam refers and explains further, that it's actually the foundation of a spiritual journey, the prerequisite condition of it is two things. Taqwa Allah is piety. وَالْإِقْتِصَارُ عَلَى مَا فَرَضَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ, and to be content with fulfilling what Allah asked you to do as obligations, either wajib or haram, either to do it or not to do it. Those obligations. So Imam Ali says these two are prerequisites: taqwa, piety. And how do we define piety? One of the definitions that I like for piety, I think it's all encompassing definition. The piety is to maintain the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our life, to be mindful of His presence every moment, before every action. The higher the level of piety goes, the more aware, the more wary one becomes of His presence in his life. So Imam Ali says, first, be mindful, remember the presence of Allah in your life, in every moment, every action, before every word you speak. And then the second thing that I like to see you take away from my advice is to make sure you do something, and it's just enough to focus on this. This is so important that I would like just to see you do not exceed to other concerns. It should be your primary concern. And that's to maintain the obligations Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks you to fulfill, to do your wajib, to avoid harams. And I explained before that Imam alayhi salam, even we have in some other hadiths, specifically when it comes to giving advice to youth, to the ones who are just starting their spiritual journey, just embarking on this journey. Imam advised them not too much be concerned about non-obligatory practices, mustahabbat. Because sometimes to focus too much on mustahabbat, to focus too much on non-obligatory practices, leads one to neglect those obligatory duties that we have. So Imam says, I would like to see you be content and limit your efforts to fulfill your mandatory obligations towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the prerequisite of your spiritual journey. Then, when you did this, after you worked on yourself to feel the presence of Allah in your life, after you did the first step, which is the doing wajib and avoiding haram, then you have to pick one of these two options to find your path, to find this, to determine which approach for your spiritual journey you are going to follow. Imam Ali says there are two ways to do that. This is a safe way, and it is another way which is riskier, but can have some advantages. The safe approach, the safe way, Imam Ali says, it is to follow the advice of the most righteous and pious people before you. The people who already experienced the same struggle that you are facing, the people who already ended their spiritual journey successfully. So they had the same concerns like you. Imam Ali highlights this, that they had the same concerns like you. they were thinking about the same important matters that you are occupied with, and they found the way. So it is the safe approach is to follow the advice because you know that they succeeded. So Imam Ali Salam says, what I would like to see you do, your takeaway after piety, after doing your obligations, avoiding harams, والأخذ بما مضى عليه الأولون من آبائك والصالحون من أهل بيتك, is to just follow the path of your righteous forefathers, people from your family, good people. فإنهم لم يدعوا أن نذروا لأنفسهم كما أنت ناظر, because they did not neglect to reflect on themselves the same way that you like to do, and you are doing it. وفكروا كما أنت مفكر, and they thought about it similar to you, who is now concerned about this, how to find the path. ثم ردهم آخر ذلك. However, what they found, the key they found to success, Imam Islam defines here the key to the success that the righteous people, the pious people before us, they found. What is the key? الأخذ بما عرفوا والإمساك عما لم يكلفوا. ثم ردهم آخر ذلك إلى الأخذ بما عرفوا والإمساك عما لم يكلفوا. The key is that they acted only on certainty. They only acted, they only took a step further or one step back when they were certain that what they do is the right decision, is the right action, what they say is the right word. They acted on certainty, and they avoided uncertain adventures unless necessary. وَالْإِمْسَاكُ عَمَّا لَمْ يُكَلَّفُ, unless obliged to do that, they avoided taking paths, trying paths that they are not certain of the outcome. So Imam Ali Salam says this is what would be the safe path. It is interesting, when I was reading the advice of the Imam Ali Salam, so to look at the pious people around you, to look at those righteous people before you, and to follow their path, to follow their lifestyle, to follow their conduct. As I was reminded of a personal memory that I have from the early years of my study back in Hafza Seminary of Qom. It goes back about 20 years ago. It was the first year that I studied my studies there. And so I was studying in Qom, and so it was well known at the time and nowadays as well, the piety and the irfan level of Ayatollah Bahjat. So it was being considered a blessing to go in his presence, ask for advice and benefit from. So I remember once I was there in the mosque of Ma'sumiyya, Fatimiyya, if I'm not mistaken. It was the mosque, and it was for the morning prayer. Surprisingly, that day, unlike the other days, which the mosque was packed and we could not even get close to late Ayatollah Bahjat, the mosque was not much occupied, so we could go to the first line for the prayer. After the prayer finished, so just imagine, it was the first year of my studies in Qom. I was totally novice. I didn't know anything about the Islamic studies yet, about the so just had the surface understanding, but I had a lot of the motivation. enthusiasm. So I went with my friend together after the morning prayer to later to Bahjat, sat next to him. He finished his prayers, his du'as, and then he looked at us and asked, what are you asking for? So I told him that we are actually new students. We just started our studies, and we are asking for an advice. He looked at me, and I remember exactly the kind of sharp sight that he had. I felt like that he's looking through my heart. So he told me, are you looking for advice? I said, yes. He said, he said, adjust your glasses. I think he repeated it twice. Adjust your glasses. It's a very important point. Adjust your glasses. Look from a true, right perspective. Do not look at the surface. Look at the bottom. Look deeper. Adjust your glasses. Look at what we do, and you do it. And look at what we avoided, and you avoid it. That was his advice. Short, but very insightful. Adjusting my glasses, looking from the right angle, looking from the right perspective, and then following the path of the pious people who we know around us, the righteous people who lived before us. And it's exactly reflecting the advice of Ali alayhi salam in this letter. The Imam says the safe approach is to follow the path, but again, after adjusting our glasses, to follow the path of the righteous people before us, to make sure to sometimes to reflect, is the way that I'm living my life goes in line with the level that I came to know of my pious father? Are my concerns the same concerns that my father had, or that the other, for example, pious relative that I trust, I know? Do I go for the same goals in life, fulfillment of the similar spiritual purposes? Or am I more concerned about my maybe material gains, more concerned about my salary, my income, my position? So this is a very helpful, very insightful point that Imam Ali salam mentions here. Then Imam says, however, if you like to go for the riskier approach, that's fine. And what is the riskier approach? Is to rely on your own judgment and investigation. The pros of this approach is that someone who relies on his own investigation may came to get a deeper insight, because he's not just following, he's trying to go deeper to find the truth, to experience it himself. However, the drawback, the cons, are that there are too many obstacles. There are too many deviations that if one is not careful enough, one would end up losing the path without even understanding it. So Imam calls it, Imam says that it is the riskier approach. Imam says, if you don't want to follow the safe path, and you are determined to find it by yourself, that's fine. But before you do that, there are preparations that you need to ensure that you have those requirements before you by yourself try to
evaluate, try to assess, to find the truth, find the right path. Imam Ali says, first ensure, make sure that your heart is not obscured against truth. And you are determined enough to find the truth. So Imam Ali says, إذا أيقنت أن قد صفى قلبك فخشع. When you became certain, which is a condition, when you became certain that your heart is not obscured, is pure, can see with clarity, and your heart is surrendered to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قد صفى قلبك فخشع وتم رأيك فاجتمع وكان حمك في ذلك حما واحدا. If you find enough determination in yourself to go and strive for finding the truth, to seek truth, despite the difficulties, and if your heart is not obscured. And Imam Ali mentions that for your heart to become clear, to see with clarity, to not be blinded, you need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his help. بِالْإِسْتِعَانَةِ بِإِلَهِكَ وَالرَّغْبَةِ إِلَيْهِ. We need to ask for his help, and you should maintain the enthusiasm, the will to get close to him, that whatever you do is for his sake. You are embarking on this journey to get closer to him. Make sure that your heart is purified first, and to do that you need to ask for his help. You need to have a pure intention, ikhlas. بالاستعانة بإلهك والرغبة إليه في توفيقك وترك كل شائبة أو لجتك في شبهة أو أسلمتك إلى ضلالة. And before you embark on this journey, make sure to get rid of any doubt, any misgiving in your heart that may block your path further later on. So if I'm intending to find the truth, if I'm intending to seek for the right path, I cannot do it as long as my heart is filled with misgivings. When I'm biased, because when I'm biased, when I'm not open to truth, which I'm not open to different opinions that may differ from what I took it for granted. When I'm biased, this biasness will block my heart, will obscure my heart. Imam Ali says, make sure first you clear your heart from these doubts, from these biases, and you look with pure intention. You seek for truth without hesitation. That's when your heart is ready for the riskier approach, for the riskier journey. And Imam warns. So it means that Imam see the take on this journey, see for one to initiate a spiritual approach before having the preparation, before purifying one's heart can be very dangerous. He warns his son. Imam alayhi salam says, فَانْظُرْ فِي مَا فَسَّرْتُ لَكَ. Look carefully at what I explained to you. وَإِنْ أَنْتَ لَمْ يَجْتَمِعْ لَكَ مَا تُحِبُّ مِنْ نَفْسِكَ وَفَرَاغِ نَظَرِكَ وَفِكْرِكَ. If be honest to yourself. If you see that you don't have the proper determination, you don't have that clarity of heart, you don't have that clear mind to go for truth by yourself, فاعلم أنك إنما تخبط العشواء وتتورط الظلماء. You have to be warned that if you are not ready, the path you take would go astray. You just take the wrong path. You just immerse yourself in darkness. وليس طالب الدين من خبط أو خلط. And it is not the seeker of, one is not the seeker of truth, seeker of faith, someone who is confused, someone who cannot identify what is right from what is wrong. والإمساك عن ذلك أمثل فتفهم يا بني وصيتي. And if that's the case, it's better for you not to do the risk. Just take the first path that I told you. Just trust the experience, the findings of the righteous and pious people before you. Do not try to find a new way. Do not try to find it yourself if you don't see that you have what it takes, because it can be a very dangerous journey. And it is not difficult to confirm the concerns of Imam alayhi salam. When we look around us, the people who fall victim to those spiritual, modern spiritual movements, new spiritual movements, and the ones who attempt to understand Quran but ended up having a biased understanding, interpretation of Quran. Because their heart is not clear yet. They don't have the clarity of heart. They enter Quran, try to understand Quran while they have their own misgivings. They look from a certain lens, certain biases, looking at Quran not to find the truth, but to find something that would confirm their own beliefs and biases. And unfortunately, that's not difficult to see around us these days. So Imam alayhi salam says, first, be careful and decide whether you want to take the safe approach or the riskier approach. If you are taking the riskier approach, you should make sure that you have what it requires first, and your heart has the clarity and is prepared for this journey. Then Imam says, if you think that your heart is ready and you can take on this journey by yourself, you find to experience it firsthand. You want to find it by yourself. Then Imam says, be careful about the method, what approach you are taking. فَلْيَكُنْ طَلَبُكَ ذَلِكَ بِالتَّفَحُّمٍ وَتَعَلُّمٍ. Your approach to find truth has to be through reflection and learning. Two fundamental points Imam Ali mentions here, that on this path, if you want to find the truth, you have to be open to learning, to learn from the others. And you have to reflect on what you learn, not to just accept it blindly, not to just reject it blindly, but to reflect, think, and try to get a deeper understanding, get a deeper insight of faith. فَلْيَكُنْ طَلَبُكَ ذَلِكَ بِالتَّفَحُّمٍ وَتَعَلُّمٍ. At the same time, Imam highlights the wrong approaches here. Avoid indulging yourself in whatever its truth is uncertain. لا بتورط الشبهات. Do not look for truth by carelessly indulging yourself in something that you are not certain about is truth. Do not, if you are taking on this path, be cautious. Learn, reflect. Do not immerse yourself in something that you are not certain of its truth. And Imam alayhi salam also remind us. So make sure that you are not you are not taking an approach that you are not certain about it. And also Imam alayhi salam mentions وَغُلُوُّ الْخُصُومَاتِ, and make sure that the path, the method that you are taking does not end in spending more time in debating, disputing others than reflecting on your finding. It is not difficult to see people, that sometimes you see people, they are so strongly defending their faith, attacking the others, that they are not spend the same amount of time on reflecting on what they consider it, they take it for granted to be the truth. Imam Ali says one of the signs of taking the wrong approach is if you find yourself arguing frequently with the people about your faith instead of reflecting on it, instead of deepening your knowledge. These two advice are very important. These two warnings, Imam Ali salam says, unless you are not certain, do not indulge yourself in something. We have another part of the letter. Imam repeat the same advice. وَأَمْسِكْ عَنْ طَرِيقٍ إِذَا خِفْتَ ضَلَالَتَهُ. Just stop of taking a path if you are afraid that it may end up in the wrong path, that you may end up losing the path. The moment that you have this fear, it's the time to stop. فإن الكف عند حيرة الضلال خير من ركوب الأحوال. Because just to be careful when you are confused is much more reasonable than to take upon such a risk. And again, looking back at some of the experiences that I had in my life, encountering people, brothers, sisters, I see how valuable this insight can be when it comes to seeking truth, when it comes to finding the spiritual path. There are countless victims, as I mentioned before, to movements that claimed to have the key to salvation, to spirituality. Let me give you examples, maybe it clarifies better the concept. I remember it was maybe before, so 10 years ago or more, that I was in Mashhad, Iran, and a relative came to visit me. And he had with him one of his friends. And his friend was so much interested in irfan, the spirituality. So we spent some time discussing different matters about the irfan and spirituality. He asked some questions, so on and so forth. He was very interested. And it was before the time of the noon prayer, Salat al-Dhuhr. And this guy told me out of blue and nowhere that, this is, about this teaching I learned in my circle of mysticism, circle of irfan. No, I don't know about it. I learned that if you perform your dhuhr prayer, your noon prayer, before the time of Adhan, that would be much more influential on your spiritual journey. And since a while, I'm doing this. You see, this is what I think Imam warns against it. Do not, be careful not to be trapped, not to be deceived by those people who claim to have new approaches to spirituality, who give you the golden key. You say certain words, you do certain actions, and that's voila, you find a mystical experience. In many cases, unfortunately, people go astray. I remember a different example, a different story. I remember that when I was in Qom, I had a neighbor. It was a Friday morning, maybe 6 or 7 a.m. He knocked on my door. So I opened the door, and these are his wordings. He told me that, Imam al-Asr has returned. I'm going to help him. I'm leaving my family in your trust. He said this and left, leaving me speechless. So I couldn't even figure out or think at the moment what he meant by this. Later on, unfortunately, I heard that he was imprisoned, and later on, so he told me indirectly, I heard from someone else about what happened to him. So he was deceived with someone who claimed to be a representative of Imam al-Mahdi. And he spent all his money and fortune for the claim of that person, and ended up being bankrupt and losing everything. Why? Just because it was so simple, trusting the claim of someone who just showed the door to the spirituality so easily. You just follow me, and you are going to be among the closest companions of Imam al-Asr. Imam already returned. There are so many other examples that I can mention about the new spiritual movements. It's not only exclusive to Islam or to Shia school of thought. The same problem we have it in other religious traditions, especially I'm talking about the monotheistic religious tradition, Abrahamic traditions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism. So if you look at some of the offshoots or cults that they claim to be rooted in Christianity, if we look at some of them, the Heaven Gate, for example, of or some other cult like Scientology, so on and so forth. I remember I think it was the Heaven Gate that claimed that for his followers that so they had a collective suicide, claiming that, so believing that there are spaceships waiting for them to take them to the next world. They have to get rid of this material body, and they will go to that spaceship going to the next world. So they committed a collective suicide. So these are so many examples of this. Imam alayhi salam, that's why Imam alayhi salam properly warns again and again, be careful, be cautious. If you are going to trust your own judgment, there are so many difficulties. So in total, I explained what Imam alayhi salam mentions about two different paths that one can walk towards finding the truth, towards finding the spiritual journey, the safe path to follow, the advice of the pious people, the righteous people before us. And the other path is to look at by yourself, to be a seeker of truth, to invest time to find it yourself. And Imam says, if that's the case, Allah good, but you have to be very careful. In his letter, Imam also mentions some basic instructions about this spiritual journey, about these principles of a spiritual journey. So many of them comes under the same umbrella of being cautious. So one of the advices that Imam mentions here and there in the letter is about being careful about one's actions and words. Imam Ali mentions, be cautious when it comes to your actions. Do not rush to something that would not be to your benefit, to your spiritual benefit, following your desires, your temptations, because you are going to regret it later on. And why? There is a rush for that. There is no need to rush. Give yourself time. Reflect more, investigate more. Just when you see something interesting, do not just throw yourself in it. Imam Ali says, أخر الشر فإنك إذا شئت تعجلت. Something that's not to your benefit, just try to postpone it. Because whenever you want, you can make it happen. So you will not lose anything. If you see there is such a unique opportunity for, if I see for fulfilling one of my desires is a unique opportunity, and the rush would make me do things that I would regret later, Imam Ali says, be careful, do not rush it. There are, if you later on decided to go to the same path, there are so many opportunities coming out. Be careful, be cautious, do not lose your balance, be moderate. On the same point, Imam Ali says, when it comes to giving your opinion, when it comes to talking about something, when you don't have knowledge about it, if you are not familiar with the topic, stop approaching it, stop talking about it, about something that you don't have enough knowledge about it, you don't have enough information about it. وَلَا تَقُلْ مَا لَا تَعْلَمْ وَإِنْ قَلَّ مَا تَعْلَمْ. Do not say something that you don't know about it properly. Even if that's the case, that you don't know much about the topic and you want just to show that I know something, because that's sometimes the case. I go to a circle, there are people talking about certain subject, I don't know anything about it, but I heard or read something in an article and I want to show that I know something. But I don't have any clue about the roots, about the related topics, and so much, so on and so forth. I just have a surface knowledge about it. Imam said it's better here to not talk about something that you are not aware enough of the consequences of the roots, and so on and so forth. And Imam reminds us, وَتَلَافِيكَ مَا فَرَطَ مِنْ صَمْتِكَ أَيْسَرُ مِنْ إِدْرَاكِكَ مَا فَاطَ مِنْ مَنْطِقِكَ. It is much easier to compensate what you lost for not talking than to compensate what you will lose if you speak about something you don't have enough information about it. So Imam in another advice mentions, speak only when it is needed. If you see that your words would benefit, would be helpful, not to show off, not to just say I know something about it. وَدَعِ الْقَوْلَ فِي مَا لَا تَعْرِفْ وَالْخِطَابَ فِي مَا لَمْ تُكَلَّفْ. Do not talk about something that you are not asked to talk about it, and you don't have enough knowledge about it. So maybe finishing my talk tonight by emphasizing this point, I mentioned it before in one of the lectures. Why so much emphasis on being careful about what we talk about, what opinions we give, what judgment we express? It might be the case that all this emphasis is because talking, using our tongue, is the main instruments through which we make social interactions. It's the most important way, the most effective way of social interactions of humans. It is also the easiest, while having the most, can have the most severe consequences. It's just a word, few words I can just say when it comes to my mind, very easy, but sometimes the consequences can stay for a life. Sometimes a careless advice can break down a family. I have a lot of examples of this. Someone who opens his heart to me about a difficulty he has with his family. If I'm not enough aware of the situation, I just hear one side and not the other side, giving the wrong advice without knowing the whole story. Sometimes a family would be separated because of wrong advice I give a friend or a relative. Sometimes, if we go higher, the consequences, sometimes a biased opinion of a politician can serve as a green light for a crime against humanity, for a genocide. Sometimes, looking from the other aspect, for someone who talks carefully, a word of wisdom can save someone, can save someone's life, can save someone from going to the right path, to the wrong path. Sometimes spoken rushed judgment, on the other hand, can lead to accusations that would take away someone's social identity, social reputation. I would kill someone's social status by a wrong judgment that I speak of without having enough knowledge about it. So the consequences of words can be very severe. They can make or break people or community. So Imam Ali says, be careful about what you talk about. It's totally fine if you know what you talk about, if you have enough knowledge, if you can help with it, just do it. But no one knows one's heart better than himself. If I know that I don't have enough information on the topic, I don't know the whole story, I'm biased on this matter, Imam says, be careful, because the consequences can be severe. I finished my talk with one hadith from the Prophet, peace be upon him, on the same point. Someone, this is the hadith, we have it in Tuhf al-Uqul. Someone came to the Prophet, asked the Prophet, peace be upon him, Ya Rasulullah, awsini, or the Prophet of Allah, give me an advice. The Prophet answered, ihfaz lisanak, watch your tongue. For the second time, it seems that he was not satisfied, he was asking for more. He asked, Ya Rasulullah, awsini, the same question, give me an advice. And the Prophet repeated the same answer, ihfaz lisanak, watch your tongue. The third time he asked, and the Prophet responded, وَيْحَكَ, woe to you. هل يكب الناس على مناخرهم في النار إلا حصائد ألسنتهم? Do you think that people would fall down on their faith to the hell unless because of the sins they committed by tongue? It is because of the tongue that people, in many cases, is the major factor that determines whether one goes to hell or to the heaven. So if we look at from the this perspective, we can see why Ali alayhi salam advises to me, be cautious. Be cautious on finding your path. Take the safe side, safe path if you are not certain that you are prepared. If you are going to be the seeker of truth by yourself, be careful. Make sure that you have the preparation, your heart is clear. And be careful, be cautious about your actions and your words. I hope, inshallah, that would be our takeaway from the lecture 31st of Nahj al-Balagha for tonight. And may Allah give us the blessing to follow the path and to apply these beautiful and valuable instructions in our daily life, inshallah. Please recite a salawat.